Hello, yeah, welcome to my channel. Thanks so much for your love in my last video. So today I'm going to be showing you how to make this stylish gown. Okay, yeah, we're going to be achieving this with an invisible dart technique. All right, so these are the needed tools and fabric. So you're going to need a main fabric, and of course the fabric you're going to be using for your cutout. So I'm going to be making use of this fabric for my cutout. I'm also going to be making use of the measurements displayed. I'll be listing that in the description box. Now, one thing you should ensure is that your fabric have similar stretch. Like when I mean similar stretch, as much as possible, they should be similar in texture. So of course, your pattern paper also have to be on fold. You don't need just one part. You need a pattern paper on fold for the skirt part. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here now is to check if my pattern paper would be enough based on my hip measurement divided by 4 plus my seam allowance. So after checking my was enough, you need to check yours too before you go ahead. So this is going to be my starting point, and the next thing I'm going to be inserting is my hip length, which is 8 inches. Now I'm going to be adding 0.5 to that 8 inches, which is going to be 0 0.5 is for my sewing allowance. So I don't want it to be shorter than what I want. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to determine my skirt length. This is going to be a gown. So I'm just going to put my tape from the origin. That is going to be my half length. My half length is on that tape point on the origin. Then I'm going to determine my full length. So you want to take time to do yours too. So after doing that, I went ahead to rule a horizontal line on the hip length, as you can see. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is to start inserting my circumference measurements. I'm going to be starting with my waist circumference, which is 28 divided by 4 divided by 4. That's going to give me 7. I marked out 7. I went ahead to insert my nipple to nipple measurement, which after dividing is 3.75, and I went down by 5 inches. Now this is going to be for my front dart. Remember I said this we are going to be achieving this gown with an invisible dart technique. So what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be closing this dart in order to have a perfect fit. So I'm going to go ahead to, mark out this same dart on this part on the other side of the paper too. Next, I'm going to be adding the 1 inch for that. I'm going to be adding that 1 inch for that on the same pattern. That is 0.5 was a mistake, please. After which I'm going to be adding 1.5 for my sewing allowance. I went ahead to divide my hip circumference divided by 4. Then I also added 1.5 for my seam allowance. Now for the lower part, this particular gown is a pencil gown. So this is totally up to your client or to your own preference. For me, I'm going to be making use of 7.5 for the pencil part. That means I took about 1.75 away from my original hip measurements. So I added my seam allowance and I went ahead to connect the 2 points. That means from the lower end down to my hip point. Then for my hip point, I'm going to be using a curve to connect it to my waist region. So this is how to draft a basic skirt, and this is the front block. So after checking all, I'm going to be cutting out the excess I don't need so that we can move ahead in this tutorial. Okay, so after, like I said, I'm going to be marking out this dot on the other part of the paper. This is very important. Okay, so I went ahead to do that. Now the next thing we're going to be doing here is to close these dots, and we're going to be closing these dots using a tape. You could use a paper tape or a sellotape. So I'm just working with what I have here. You need to close these dots in order for us to be able to achieve um, a perfect fit. So after closing the dots, I'm going to go ahead to fold this back into two so that I can cut out the back pattern. So it means on the back pattern and on the front pattern, there will be no dots on the skirt part. I hope you understand. So this is what the skirt is looking like after folding into two. So for the back pattern, I'm going to go ahead to add my zipper allowance, which I'm making use of 1.5. So I'm just going to mark this out, and because of I closed the dart, I'm going to be having a little bit of curve toward the back region, but that's okay. So you want to take your time to mark out to ensure that whatever you have there is going to be accurate. So after marking out the part I don't want, I'm just going to go ahead to cut this out. And my fabric is on fold, so I'm going to be having two pieces for my back pattern. So after cutting, this is what it looks like. I'm just going to go ahead to open it up and also to mark so that I can know my right side and wrong side. Now back to the main skirt, the front block. The first thing you are going to be doing is to extend that hip length line to the other side of your pattern paper. This is just like a guide. So now we want to first of all create three slant lines, and to do this, you're going to determine where you want it to start from, and you have to determine the parts where you want your cutout to be. So for me, I want my cutout to be on the left side when I'm done. So that is why I had to label left and right this way. I hope you understand. So from my waist point, the origin of this skirt, I'm going to be going down by 3 inches. I'm going to be marking that point, 3 inches. Now for that point, that will be my first cutout, okay? So I'm going to be coming down by 4 inches. So my first cutout will be from the hip point is going to be 4 inches. That is going to be how wide it is at that point. So after that, I'm going to be leaving a little bit of space, which is going to be 1.5 inch. So that is going to be still the main fabric. In my own case, that will be black fabric at that point. You understand? Now the next point too, I mark another 4 inches after that 1.5 inches. I label that cutout too. So the first one is for the first cutout, the second one is for the second cutout. Now I also went ahead to label another 1.5 inches after the second cutout. This will be also the black fabric will be there, after which I'm going to be marking out for the last cutout, which is the third cutout. I marked out 5 inches and not 4 inches. I hope you get that. So the first one is 4 inches for the first cutout. After that, I left a space of 1.5. The second one, another 4 inches. I left a space of 1.5, while the last cutout, which is the third one, is 5 inches. I hope you get this. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, which I mistakenly did not record on camera, was from the center front. As you can see, this crease line in the middle, I went towards the other side by 3 inches. 3 inches. So this will just tell you where you want your slants, your cutout to stop. So from that point where I ruled that line, that is where I want my cutout to stop. I'm going to be going up by 4.5. Now, there's no specific measurement. This is just totally up to what you want. And I'm going to go to the point where my third cutout is, and the last line on that cutout, I'm going to be using it to create a slant line, as you can see. So the parts where I measured 5, I'll create a slant line there. So I went out to the upper part of that 1.5 where my second cutout line ended on that 4 inches. Then to the other line toward the right where I labeled, I'll be going up by 5 inches. Okay, you know the lower end I went up by 4 inches, 4.5 rather. So this second part now I'm going up by 5 inches to create another slice line, which is going to be for the second cutout. Now for the first cutout, I'm going to the point where I have my 3 inches from the waist point, okay, and on the other line that is on the right, which I labeled, I'll be going up by 5.5. So I just labeled this so that it can be self-explanatory. I do hope you understand, but if you're a little bit confused, you can don't hesitate to send me a message or make a comment so that I can explain better to you there. So after marking that point where I have my 5.5, I'll be connecting my first cutout point from that 3 inches toward the hip point down to my new line here. So this is what it looked like. I hope you understand. I hope you understand. So this is what it's looking like. So the second part my first cutout where 4 inches end, I connected it to that point. My second cutout where 4 inches end, I connected it to that point. Then my last cutout. So then I'll go to the point where I have my 1.5, that line of 1.5 where it ended. Then I'm going to be making a slant line to form a triangle. Now, if you want another shape, you can, but I would just, if you want something similar to the design that has been posted, just make use of this. Okay, so it's like we are forming a triangle. So I went to the other 1.5 where it end also. Then I created a slant line to meet the other slant line that has been created initially. I hope you are getting this. Okay. I know it might be a little bit confusing, especially if you're a beginner, but just take your time to go through this video. I believe you are going to get it. So same for the first cutout. I'll be making a triangle, okay, using the 1.5 mark I made. Okay, so you see why we needed to do a 3 inches extension from the center front, right? So that our cutout can end at the same point. But if you want to be innovative, you want to be stylish, you could make one cutout, longer than the other. But for this tutorial, I'll just leave it here. So I went ahead to highlight those cutout slats line with a marker. Then I'm just going to cut, as you can see. So I labeled also. It's very important you label, please, and note the direction at which you're going to be fixing. This will save you a whole lot of stress. I'm not even kidding. So after doing this, this is what our main fabric will look like, which is going to be the black. Then this is what our cutout is going to look like. So on the main fabric, you are going to be adding 0.5 on those cutout region. It's very important to add sewing allowance so that your fabric will not be shorter than what you want when you are done joining. So I'm just going to go ahead to cut out. As you can see, as I'm cutting out, if you take note of what I did, you're going to notice my sewing allowance on the cutout is there. So this is how yours should also be. So the next thing I'm going to do after this is to to get my fabric for the cutout and add seam allowance to it too. So I'm going to, for number 1 and number 3, I'll be using the same fabric, the same color. So I'm just going to place it, as you can see. That is why I said it's important to label the direction so that you can know how it's going to be. So you have to add 0.5 inches round the cutout. You have to add it. It's very important, okay? So you have to add it so that you don't have shortage when you are done joining your piece together. So this is what 1 and 3 is looking like. I also went ahead to cut 2 off camera, which is a different color. So this is what it's giving me when I'm done, okay? And I'm just going to show you once I'm attaching it. I will show you a sewing video, so you don't need to stress yourself over that. So please, also I would advise you to iron your fabric and label your fabric very well. We label the pattern, so label your fabric and iron your fabric. Electricity has not been stable in my place, so I'm having issues, even ironing. But I would make sure I iron this before joining, but I just have to film. So please do well to iron your fabric before joining your piece together. So I just went ahead to remove all the pin, and at the end of it all, before I've not ironed here, I'll still do that. This is what your pattern should look like, your fabric should look like when you're done joining. So now to the front pattern, to the front block rather, and the back block, I'm going to be leaving a video link in the description where you can, which is a detailed video of how to draft a front and a back block. Okay, you're going to get to understand better if you're a total beginner. But for this particular video, I'm going to be drafting my back and my front block together. So that is why I'm going to be having 2 necklines, as you can see. So for the back neck depth, I'm making use of 1.5. For the width, I'm making use of 3 inches. So the width for the back and the front is the same thing. So for the front depth, I'm making use of 3 inches. Now if you look at the front neckline, it is having a round neckline. Then it has a U neckline. So I'll be making the alteration when I want to cut my front block. But for now, let's just make do with the back neckline. So I went down by 1 inch for my slant and also came in by zero point 0.5 after dividing what I have left in order for me to be able to create my armhole. So I divided my bust measurement by 4 and I inserted that on the chest line. So I made a curve with my pattern master in order to create my front armhole and my back armhole. Remember I said I'm drafting both together. So you need your nipple to nipple measurement at this point. You have to insert your nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 on your shoulder to waist line, your shoulder to nipple line, your shoulder to under bust. And I'm just going to be making a waist dart. So I'm going to be taking zero point 0.5 inch on both sides in order for me to be able to create a waist dart. Now, after doing that, I'm going to go ahead to divide my waist round measurement divided by 4. That gives me 7. I'm going to be adding the 1 inch for my dart, and I'm going to go ahead to add my seam allowance, which is 1.5. I added my seam allowance on the chest line too, and I'm going to be using a slant line to connect the 2 points together. Now, the front and the back length is different. The shoulder to waist length is different. For my front, I have 15.5. For my back, I have 14 inches. So the difference between them is going to be 1.5, and I'll be using this to create my bust dart. So from that point, I just went down by 1.5 and I connected that point to my shoulder to nipple line. Now we're going to go ahead to cut, and just look at the way I'm going to be cutting. So especially for this bust point, I'm going to be closing this bust point because I said this gown has invisible dart technique. So I don't want shortage on that point. So I'm going to be closing it this way even before I go ahead to cut. So after closing it up, just with my hands, not yet with tape, you are going to see how it looks like. So this is what it looks like. If we did not close it up like that, definitely you have shortage when you are done sewing. So right now, after doing that, I'm going to go ahead to use a tape to put this in place because we don't need this bust dart. We are going to be closing this up because we don't want to sew, I don't want to sew any dart on the dress. It's going to be invisible dart cloth. So I went ahead to close the waist dart as you can see. Then this is the fabric I'll be using. So I'm going to be measuring that 14-inch for my back pattern. Remember my back is 14 inches, but I'm using my front to cut my back. So the side will be the same, but for the center back, I went up by 1 inch in order for me to have an accurate 14 inches, okay, including my sewing allowance. So I'm just going to go ahead to cut after adding my zipper allowance on the front side as you can see, and this is what it's going to look like when I'm done cutting the back pattern. So after removing my pin, this is what I have. So my back is ready. I'm going to be cutting facing for that off the camera. Now for the front part, you are going to be pinning this way, especially towards the bust region, because remember that we've closed up the waist and the nipple measurements, the bust dart rather. Of course, the front pattern is not totally balanced, so you have to place it in this way in order to have a perfect fit. So I just went ahead to check all measurement, then I started cutting. So for the front armhole now, I'm going to be trimming off the back armhole as you can see, and I'll cut that when I'm done. So if you've watched to this point, do well to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so that when I post videos, you get to see them. And don't forget to drop a comment. It encourages me to do more. Thank you. So for the front neckline, I thought I'll be making an alteration to give me a U shape, right, in form of events. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to determine how deep I want mine to be. I don't want mine to be as deep as the original design, so I'll be doing something slightly different from that. So if you want a U shape, just go ahead to create that U shape. But for me, I don't want it to be that wide. I just feel that's not totally me. So I'm going to be doing something that resonates around what I want. Okay. So this is totally up to you. So I'm just going to go ahead to, okay, cut that out, and I'm going to be replicating that on the fabric as well. So just a tip, if you still use the same scissors to cut your pattern paper and your fabric, then your fabric scissors won't last. Okay, so get different scissors for your fabric and your pattern paper. So after I was done doing that, I went ahead to remove the pin, as you can see, and this is what the final look is giving. I'm going to be cutting a facing, and in my next video, this is just part one, I'll be showing you the sewing process. I hope you learned a thing or two. Thank you so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.